What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and today we're going to deep dive into a pretty shallow pool for now. Jimi Hendrix. I'm going to rank his albums according to my favorite, not by any sort of standard objective definition of best, but my favorite. I'm doing five. I'm doing the five. When I started to get into Hendrix in the early 80s, mid to early 80s, there were like five albums in existence: the three studio albums, the Banded Gypsys live album, and the sort of post-release of stuff Hendrix was working on, The Cry of Love. And that was it. That was like the definitive collection. There were other sort of like random UK versus US weird live things or compilations or half live, half compilation things. But those were like the standard five that I think everybody agreed upon were like the canon, right? And then you get to the 80s and you get a whole bunch of stuff. You get Stages, those four live shows. You get a whole bunch of other stuff coming out once we hit the 80s and on, and it's still happening today. So I'm just going to do those five, but I do have plans to eventually maybe address everything Hendrix ever was released in his name, because I think he's worth it. It's Jimi Hendrix. Of these five albums, I would say one is like an A tier. One is maybe an S minus, and then the other three are S plus plus plus. The rankings of the top three, it's really just personal favorite. I think they're all pretty much perfect albums. I'll argue for why I rank them the way I do. And how did we get here from Frank Zappa? Jimi Hendrix is on the cover of We're Only in It for the Money, or on this part, the inner gatefold, what would eventually become the CD cover, right? Frank covers him in '88, does that Purple Haze that you can hear on The Best Band You Never Heard in Your Life. I'm sure there's Zappa riffs aplenty in his playing, I'm assuming, probably. He did borrow, maybe, arguably, the riff from Who's No for the Wrap the Newspaper Around My Head part of Cosmic Debris. There may be some influence there. Jimi Hendrix. Plus, they're both absolutely fantastic, sort of incomparable. Like they're unique guitar players. But anyways, let's get on with it. Five albums. Do I have to say anything else about Jimi Hendrix? I mean, Jimi Hendrix. If you don't know Jimi Hendrix, just go back to the first album, find what his first album was, and just listen to those. Just listen to the first three studio ones. That's really all you need, and that's it. The fourth one, though, that was released, has what may be the best guitar song of all time. And then the fifth one is on this list because that was the first Hendrix. I keep saying Zappa, the first Hendrix album I bought. But anyways, on to the top five here. On to my ranking of Hendrix's five albums from 5 to 1, according to my favorite. Here we go. Number five is 1991's The Cry of Love. 1971's The Cry of Love. This was a posthumous release after he passed away. And it has some sort of legitimacy, but while it did come out within months of his death, it is sort of like, striking while the iron's hot type thing. They are tracks that Hendrix was working on for his fourth album. They had appeared on production notes or, some kind of track listing he had mocked up. So there is sort of a legitimacy to the album, though ultimately he is not the one that released it or decided on the final set list. It was the first Hendrix album I bought. I heard a song on the radio one day and I was like, this sounds just like Hendrix. I absolutely love it. I've not heard it before. Turned out to be Freedom. I had been paying attention to radio for years at this point, 2 or 3 years, right? I knew dozens of Hendrix songs because they got played so often. I'm almost positive I had never heard Freedom before. And I was like, how have I never heard this song before? Why don't they play this as much as they play everything else? And I think this was like on a Monday or Tuesday, because then the weekend came and I went with my mom to the mall, went to the record store, and I bought this album, The Cry of Love, because I was like, I don't want to wait that long to hear Freedom again. And I remember buying it thinking to myself, oh, now they're going to play it all the time on the radio. They did not. And I was happy I bought it. Though I did realize that Angel was a Hendrix song at that point, something that I don't think I had paid much attention to, that I had heard before, a song that I think has been in movies or TV shows. It seems like it's a pretty ubiquitous, somewhat in pop culture, Angel, right? I don't know. Maybe not. But it's a good album. It's like, it reminds me of The Who's The Who by Numbers, not a concept album. It's definitely going back to more of our simpler rock times. The Who by Numbers, after after they had done like epic concept albums and dropped an epic absolute just like whatever Who's Next is, just dropped this like epic album, right? The Who by Numbers felt like let's just take it easy. And that's kind of what this feels like. Let's have fun. Let's jam. Let's get some good guitar in there. Let's play some good songs. Maybe what ultimately like makes this at number 5 and maybe like an A tier and not higher. It's just the song qualities. Maybe the songwriting is just not as strong as on the other 4 albums. But so many fantastic songs. Freedom, Easy Rider, high energy stuff, Straight Ahead, Astroman, Drifting has a very nice sort of like lyrical type floating vibe about it. Fits the title perfectly. Belly Button Window, the closing sort of like blues type fun little quirky thing about looking out your mom's belly while you're inside her and pregnant. Just some really good stuff on here. Just a fun, solid A tier Hendrix album. Really, really good listen. Yeah, I think it's a good album. But that's my number 5, The Cry of Love. Number 4 is Band of Gypsys, the only live album released by Hendrix during his lifetime. This was recorded on January 1st in 1970, came out in March of the same year, 2 months later. Yeah, it's a live album. It is with Billy Cox on bass and Buddy Miles on drums. It's definitely a harder, bluesier, maybe a little more edgier, funkier vibe than on the first 3 albums. I think like there are moments when they're jamming and they're way out there, whether we're in like Who Knows or Machine Gun or just the straight ahead solos on side 2. Like it's just like it's some of the greatest sort of like acid, psych, hard rock, guitar centric, like space rock, but not in like a Pink Floyd space rock sense. But there are times in like Who Knows when you're just like out there and it's just like this drummer and this bass player and Jimmy on guitar and you're just like, where am I? I'm just like, I'm in the middle of nowhere and I only have like these instruments to guide me. And like they just managed to go so many incredible places, but in a very the experience did it in a different way. I'm thinking of something like the 15-minute Voodoo Child. There was something a lot more spacey, floaty about that because of the sort of the tendencies of the drummer. And this one is definitely a little more harder hitting, but it's still got this really, really out there sense about it. Side A, 2 incredible songs. Who Knows? This awesome little kind of low-key, sultry little riff that they kind of jam around. And then what arguably is the greatest guitar-based song of all time as far as you want to hear how you should play a guitar, you want to hear like the possibilities of guitar playing and what we're talking, this is 1970, Machine Gun. Anti-Vietnam War protest song. It's got a haunting riff. It feels like you're in the jungle. It's like, why has this song not been literally in every single Vietnam movie ever made? Like it's a haunting, disturbing song. Between the drumming, which just sounds like either the rat-a-tat-tat of like a march or the rat-a-tat-tat of gunfire, which just sporadically just kind of seems to burst throughout the song. Jimmy like turning the guitar and just like a noise machine, just gun sound effects, and just it is a devastating listen. One of the greatest things ever released. Yeah, just fantastic. Must hear, especially if you like love guitar playing. Side 2 is just 4 incredibly, really fun live rockin' songs. Probably the highlight being song 3, Message of Love, which is just some of the best guitar playing ever. Just absolutely fantastic. But all 4 songs are fantastic. They're all just great jams. The energy is good. Some of the best live music you've ever heard. Yeah, phenomenal live album. It's like S plus tier maybe, and the next 3 are S plus because the next 3 are just kind of perfect albums. But number 4, Band of Gypsys. Number 3 is Jimmy's second album, Axis Bolt of Love. And I did not reference earlier that another Zappa reference is Jimmy essentially gets his own whole verse in We're Turning Again when Frank's sort of bemoaning the current state of music in the 80s and looking back to the 60s. That is some of Frank's laziest songwriting. Like Jimmy feedback, come back and your haze is so purple and your axis is bold as love. Come on, Frank. That's bad. That's just bad. Your haze is so purple and your axis is bold as love. Bad. Perfect album, though. The album is perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Kind of pretty much the same thing as the first album. Maybe a little brighter colors. Maybe not as like deep bass heavy, and maybe a little more of a lighty, flighty, psychedelic. Like the psych energy was down here on the first album, and I think the psych energy is a little more floaty and free on this one. Some of the greatest psychedelic rock, space rock music ever made. It's got Little Wing on it, right? Little Wing, arguably one of the greatest songs ever performed, written, just everything about Little Wing. Closes out with Bold as Love, another fantastic song. There's nothing bad on here. Opens up with the spacey EXP, drops into the little kind of low key Up from the Skies, a little bit like, hey man, you ready for this? You ready for this? Then we just attack with Spanish Castle Magic, was one that has the greatest dum, bum, just one of the greatest riffs ever in that song. Wait Until Tomorrow, Ain't No Telling. We drop in a Little Wing. Side A closes out with the fantastic dun. If 6 was 9, just like blues rock acid heaven. Just, oh, what a fantastic song. Side 2, You've Got Me Floating. Castles Made of Sand, which, man, the lyrics to Castle Made of Sand are not the happiest lyrics, right? Every time this song drops off, I'm like, oh, this is a great song. And then by the end of it, you're to the lyrics and you're like, it's really depressing at the end of it, right? I mean, there's down there, you hear her scream, you're a disgrace, right? Just, yeah, it's kind of a depressing little song. Anyways, there's a little side on Castles Made of Sand, which is a great song. She's So Fine, fun little cover song. One Rainy Wish, the awesome Little Miss Lover, and then closing out with the fantastic Bold as Love. It's just perfect. The band is perfect. We got Mitch Mitchell on drugs, Noel Redding on bass, on drugs, on drums. That is the experience of the first 3 albums. But it's like, the guitar playing is perfect. The songs are perfect. The band is perfect. The drumming is perfect. The bass is perfect. It's like, not only is this some of the best psych music of all time, it's being played by maybe the best rhythm section of all time and arguably the best guitar player of all time. It's just perfection. And like the songs, like, for all the Spanish Castle Magics on here, you got, or the If 6 was 9, you got these delicate little things like Little Wing and this kind of like weird little delicate, but maybe not Castles Made of Sand. And then you got just the so almost Dylan-esque, but not Dylan-esque because it's Hendrix-esque lyrics of Bold as Love and just that awesome guitar fade out and then fade back in. You're just destroying everything. Yeah, it's just a perfect album. It's just number 3 because I think the album as a whole, might work a little bit better than what I have at number 2, but it's undeniable that the songs on number 2 are all just like, wow, how do you get this many good songs on one album? And so this one maybe has a couple songs that are maybe just great and not mind-blowing. But that's my number 3. Jimmy, your axis is Bold as Love. Number 2 is Are You Experienced? And I'm just going to read the track list off this album. I'm not reading a greatest hits track list. This is the track list off this album. Purple Haze, Manic Depression, Hey Joe, Love or Confusion, May This Be Love, I Don't Live Today, The Wind Cries Mary, Fire, Third Stone from the Sun, Foxy Lady, and Are You Experienced? Have you ever been experienced? Have you ever been experienced? Like, what the heck? That's like a greatest hits. Like, what to say about this album? Every time I play it, I always forget just how heavy Purple Haze is. It's a heavy song. Manic Depression, I think a lot of people know Manic Depression, but to me, Manic Depression maybe should have been the biggest hit on this album. Like, what? That's a ridiculously great song. Hey Joe, another Zappa connection. Right, sort of. Love or Confusion, May This Be Love, I Don't Live Today, we're getting a little bit weird at the end of the album, Wind Cries Mary, perfect. Fire, probably the worst cover I've ever heard in my life. I haven't listened to it in decades, but Dennis DeYoung covering Fire, like on his like the first solo album I think he did after Styx. Not very good. Third Stone from the Sun. Come on, man. Like you get some like Pink Floyd space rock expanding what? Just mind expansion at its best. Foxy Lady, and then Are You Experienced? Just ending with weirdness. Just psych weirdness. What year are we right here? We're in 1967. Yeah, May 12th, 67, man. Yeah. One of the greatest psych albums ever made. It is perfect. It is a perfect album. Like, it's a perfect album. It's only number one because of I have perfect personal preferences that I like in albums, which is why number one is number one. But it's a perfect album. Perfect album. If you haven't heard it, fix your life right now and go get it. It's a perfect album. That's my number two. Are You Experienced? Number one is his third and final studio album, a double album, Electric Ladyland. Did this not also come out in 68? So like a year and a half later after, I don't know. Came out in 68. I have a theory about this album, and I think it's constructed the way it is for an express purpose. But my theory is Electric Ladyland is a place, whether that place is a state of mind or a state of consciousness or a state of being or whatever Electric Ladyland is, right? It exists as this idea. And side A of this album is sort of getting access to Electric Ladyland, kind of getting used to Electric Ladyland, and then you're full on, this is what Electric Ladyland is. So the opening in The Gods Made Love is sort of like, hey, whatever you need to do to get here, you're now doing that. You're walking through fog, you're traveling, you're taking medicine that induces this sort of experience, right? Then second song is Have You Ever Been to Electric Ladyland? Jimmy's your host. He's walking you in. He's like, hey man, have you ever been here, man? Look around, it's a great place. Come in. Then he takes you through like the busier part of town, which is crosstown traffic. There's a lot going on here, but wait, we're not really there yet. And like then you get to this like vast door and he's like, this is Electric Ladyland, and you walk in to Voodoo Child, which is just Voodoo Child. 14, near 15 minutes of just blues, rock, psych, rock, acid, rock, space, rock, guitar, indulgent heaven. It is just one of the greatest single performances of anything. So Voodoo Child is simply like magnificent. And you experience Voodoo Child and that is your Electric Ladyland experience. Like this is it. This is like sort of the main show. But you can't go back to normalcy after that, right? There's all these little other side attractions. It's like you've done the main show, but like visit these other side attractions. And side B is sort of like these other side attractions. You get Little Miss Strange, Long Hot Summer Night, which are two pretty straightforward sort of like psych pop songs, sound of the 60s, very kind of easier type material. Again, the playing is awesome, the musicians are awesome, but it's definitely a more familiar, especially to the late 60s. You get two more straightforward, jammy, bluesy, guitar-based numbers and Come On Part 1 and Gypsy Eyes. And then you get the sort of Baroque art psych pop of Burning of the Midnight Lamp, which also has all this kind of weird psychness in it. And it's just like this beautiful sort of like, oh, now we're going to do a bunch of little side attractions at Electric Ladyland before we're like sort of decompressed and ready to leave. My one complaint on this album is I think Burning of the Midnight Lamp should have opened side B. I think sort of the sort of art pop nature of the psych works better as a transition out of just the in-depth craziness of Voodoo Child. And I think it's a better seamless transition. We're having it at the end of side. Seems like we've come back to normalcy with more straightforward moment music. And then we're going back up into weirdness, which kind of works considering what side C is. But it fits better with my narrative if it leads off side B. But we go back into some weirdness with Burning of the Midnight Lamp. And then side 3, you get Rainy Day Dream Away, which is just like, hey, thank you for coming. It's like nice lounge music. We're going to jam. We got some funky little stuff going on. It's like a very breezy, almost like, hey, thank you very much. Almost cocktail lounge type welcoming music. Sounds fantastic. And then we get 1983, A Merman, I Should Turn to Be. Awesome riff. Low-key riff that I think every jam band should put into their repertoire, because if you're jamming out, like I can imagine Fish like just like buried in a tweezer and Trey starts playing that riff, man, you can just go so many fantastic places. So we get this song, which is this sort of like almost dreamy, very like Jimi Hendrix sort of dreamy song. Then we just go into deep space, man. Like we go into deep Jimi Hendrix's version of deep space. And where like Voodoo Child was him like jamming straight ahead, this is him doing that other psych thing. Like, hey, the Grateful Dead can do this kind of thing. We can do this kind of thing. Only when they come out of it, there's almost more of an Allman Brothers energy and sort of the upbeat nature of the jam, mainly because it's one guitarist leading it and not like Jerry and Bob going at it and not as many musicians. So it has more of an Allman Brothers sort of emerging out of Mountain Jam or something type feel. But it's just fantastic. It's like, okay, we know he can rock hard for 50 minutes. He can go space and true psych for 15 minutes. And then the kind of ramps up to like almost a Chuck Berry-esque ending, and then we kind of go back down to sort of the jam does. Then we go back down into the song, and then Moon Turn the Tides Gently, Gently Away is just like us like floating away out of Electric Ladyland. And this is the exit. This is how we decompress. And we're now okay to leave Electric Ladyland. But when you leave, side 4, side D is like, hey, but we're going to party because you made it. So stick around because we got 4 of the greatest songs Jimi Hendrix ever committed to vinyl waiting for you at the end of this ride. Still Raining, Still Dreaming. Wah, wah. Just straight off the bat. Awesome energy. Just straight up, hey, let's play guitar and jam. House Burning Down. Gets a little bit weirder. Has a little bit of a darker side. Gets a little more exploratory, but in the best way possible. And you're like, this is just, we've already done everything. Like, what is this Electric Ladyland? Can it get any better than this? He drops All Along the Watchtower. And you're like, okay, what? The definitive cover of all time. Right now. The definitive cover of all time. I'm saying that. All Along the Watchtower. There is not a better cover of a better... No, the definitive cover of all time. Yeah. And then, as if that's not enough, we go back to Voodoo Child slightly. It returns slightly with just some of the most ridiculous guitar playing of ever. Like Fish... Trey drops in a little Voodoo Child, like that opening riff a lot in his solos. You know, at least enough where I'm like, oh, that's something he's returned to. And as sweet as it is to hear, like what follows just can never, ever, ever match what happens like within the first 30 seconds of this song. It is just like some of the most perfect guitar playing ever. So yeah, it's a perfect album. It takes you on a journey. It's got everything you could ever want in the psych music realm. It is utter, utter, utter perfection. One of the best albums ever made. Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland. That's all. All right, that's all I got. I was getting really like nostalgic there, feeling in my feels about Electric Ladyland. That's one of the first albums that like, I hadn't listened to it. It's one of those I haven't listened to in many, many years because there was a point where I'm like, I can't get anything else out of this album anymore. Like, you know, you just listen to things so much. You're like, okay, I've heard it. And then every time I go back and listen to it, which I recently did, I'm like, oh my God, it's a perfect album. This is a perfect album. All 3 of them are perfect albums. But yeah, anyways, that's all I got. I'm going to do all the live stuff and other stuff because Jimi Hendrix I can listen to forever. He's like Frank, just give it all to me. And there's going to be something relevant in almost everything, like everything. It's fantastic stuff. But anyways, yeah, that's all I got. Let me know how you would rank them. Thoughts on these 5 albums. I'll eventually get to the other stuff. But yeah, that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, and go listen. Go listen to go listen to Machine Gun. If you haven't listened to Jimi Hendrix in a while, just go listen to Machine Gun. Yeah. Peace. Talk to you later.